the next generation of joy.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Now, Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa believes the financing of the grid expansion is not the problem, but a major concern is how they would obtain the funds. Ramokgopa says government would continue to collaborate closely with the private sector to alleviate the country's energy crisis. He briefed the media on Monday about the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. To unpack this further, I am joined by the Managing Director of Worldwide Industrial and Systems Engineer, Mohammed Ali. Thank you so much, Mr. Ali, for your time here on ENCA. Just first of all, let's start with what he said. He says it's not necessarily a problem to launch this project, but the problem is obtaining the funds. So, how's that going to be dealt with, in your opinion, if they can't obtain the funds to actually implement a project that's supposed to take us out of darkness?
Good afternoon, South Africa, and yes, thank you so much. It's a very important question. There is funds, and I think most organizations feel like they can assist, but what is the process to attain these funds? And what do they need to do to be able to add the value that's required to execute the action plan? I think the best way to do this is if you have a standardized procurement process with a defined criteria of who can access the funds once the criteria is met, validated, audited, to be able to justify that the execution of that particular task can be accounted for. Right now, there's a decent action plan in place. There is a particular process in place. There is funds available. But the question is, how do you attain these funds, as you are alluding to? And I think if we don't have a detailed criteria of selection, if we don't have a progressive evaluation process, and we are able to track the relevant evidence of the people executing these tasks to utilize the funds effectively, we don't want to run into a COVID-19 situation in terms of handing out PPE. So I think it's important that from the lessons learned in that era, we need to be able to ensure that we effectively ensure that the people that are being given the funds have the capability, have been well vetted, and most importantly can be held accountable for ensuring that the activities can be executed on that action plan.
And of course, it's also still about the red tape that still exists, in terms of actually procuring public-private partnership.
Yeah, it is. In South Africa, we obviously have processes, but there is so much red tape because of insecurity of the processes. So when there is someone that's signing off in a particular procurement process, there's a lot of insecurity. Do you trust the person that's vetted the process? Do you trust the person that's done the evaluation? There's so much mistrust in our own processes that we are unable to make those effective decisions, because at the end of the day, you feel that you utilize the processes, the policies to make up this decision, but then there's a loophole where maybe, for example, an individual may not have done the necessary vetting that's required, and then it gets compromised. And I think the key factor is that if we don't look at optimization, we don't look at optimization, and we don't look at effectively streamlining the process, and the most important thing is trust. If we don't trust our own processes, then we are obviously looking to fail once again, because nobody's going to get anything signed off at the matter.
So currently the minister is in the Free State. I think today is probably day 2 of that particular conference or summit, where he says that the Free State is geographically perfect in terms of its location for, the renewable energies. Do you agree as an engineer? Is the Free State the perfect place?
Looking at where we are in South Africa, I think there's a lot of factors to consider. The nice thing of being in South Africa and looking at the engineering research that has been put forward is that, fortunately enough, solar from a renewable point of view, wind from a particular renewable point of view are the 2 most effective methods of looking at energy. And looking at where the Free State is, yes and no. It will always work again. On the yes side, yes, it from a geographical point of view, it does get the relevant sunlight that's required. You do get enough wind, but I do think there's other areas that could mostly benefit for it. But I think it's not just the generation, it's also the transmission. It's also the distribution. And it's about trying to be able to put all those particular elements together to be able to optimize and most effectively trying to be able to be as cost effective, but more so being able to generate. I would have thought that we would have considered nuclear. I mean, if you look at the statistics, we are, I think, the seventh country in the world that has rich uranium what you call minerals. However, I do feel that the public opinion and the insecurity of us South Africans not understanding it has diverted us from moving or even considering it. But I do think it's a more cleaner energy. It should be something that should be on the table. We do have one already at Koeberg, and I do think it's more sustainable in the long term. That's my opinion. But I think Free State, yes and no, due to the factors that I've just mentioned earlier.
Do you believe Koeberg can still be our answer? It was supposed to be decommissioned in 2025. They did receive an extension. It's the only nuclear power station, not only in South Africa, but in the African continent as a whole. But some experts say we don't need nuclear. So I wonder what you say as an engineer, because we'll take anything as South Africans at this point because we just want power.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics behind this as well. And I think that's what South Africans want. They want transparency. They want to understand. We are someone that wants results very quickly. We don't trust the process as much. We want results immediately. And rightly so, because we've actually been burnt with the current energy challenges we have. If you look at the first world countries in terms of how they have excelled with nuclear energy, and we in South Africa, we have the skills, we have the expertise. And I think by shutting and decommissioning, we'll be losing a lot of those skills and reliance on nuclear. And I think it might allude to now going into all our coal-fired, and that's not it's not as clean as you'd want it from an environmental perspective. Now you've got the Paris Accord in terms of going climate, or the whole idea of going green. The environmental standards are coming into play and putting pressure on organizations like ESCOM. I do think nuclear, if it's clearly understood by the people, by the communities, and the safety protocols in terms of how well they have advanced in technology, it would be an alternative solution for us. But public opinion is of the matter that it might be too risky. I am of the opinion, from an engineering perspective, it will be more cost effective and it will add more value to us. And I think that is where we should look at. I'm not negating that we should look at alternative energies, such as the renewable in terms of wind and solar, which will, compensate for that. But I'm also scared on the fact that, with these action plans going private sector, and I'm all for it going private sector, do we have the right processes in judging who can execute these tasks? Or are we heading into a disaster where there are certain individuals that might be given the contract who will not be able to execute and will go 10 steps back instead of going 10 steps forward?
That's a very important point that you make. We have spoken on channel with someone from a university, a professor from a university, saying that project management is not taken seriously in South Africa, and sometimes that's where our problem is, and that universities should start making it an official subject or even cause at institutions. But thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us here on ENCA. Thank you for your expertise. That was Managing Director of Worldwide Industrial